Hello folks, Dick Fairburn here. I think there are about 1 million videos on YouTube about how to sight in a scope and rifle. I've been doing it since the mid-80s out in Wyoming as a long-range hunter, and since the early 90s as a police sniper and sniper trainer. And I've learned a few things. The idea that you can put one hole in a piece of paper and move your crosshairs to it and you're sighted in, well, that might work for the average deer hunter who's shooting 100 or 200 yards, but it's not going to work long range. And it's not going to work for rounds that have a lot of drop in their trajectory. If you want to see how I do mine for precision sighting, stick with me. On January 1st of 2023, my home state here in the People's Republic of Illinois was one of the last shotgun deer hunting states to authorize the use of straight wall rifle cases for deer hunting. I have a farm I hunt not too far from where I live here in Illinois, and my main stand is a elevated platform with one of those plastic really nice deer stands on there that I can turn the heater on and get fat and lazy and be comfortable. And to the left of my stand, to the west, I can shoot about 250 yards once the crops are out of the fields. I've been using an H&R single shot with a scope, and I had aiming points out to 200 yards, so I could hit at 200 yards, but I really think that slug was going to be out of steam past about 150. So that did not reach me anywhere near the end of those open fields I have. So when the straight wall rifle case law went into effect, I knew I wanted one. I'd done my research and I decided that the 350 Legend would probably be the best round for me. I can also use the 357 in a lever action that I have. I can use a 4570 in a lever action I have, but again, they're relatively short range affairs. So on Black Friday of last year, I stood in line from about 3:30 in the morning on at a Bass Pro Shops because they had these rifles on sale. They had the Savage Axis model that came complete with a 3-to-9 scope. And for club members that use their credit card, I could buy that rifle for $300 scope and all that morning. And I got the last 350 Legend that they had in stock. So I bought some ammo, got it sighted in. That scope is a far from top end scope that comes with it. It was a 3-to-9. It had additional aiming points in the reticle. And I could not find the MOA details on that on their website. They said to use their app. I loaded their app and I couldn't get it to run, at least not on my phone. So I came out here the best I could at the range, and I figured that this line was this many minutes of angle and on down. So I figured I could shoot to almost 300 yards with this scope. And there are a number of does that come out in the east side of that field every evening, 15-20 minutes before last light. And they're usually at about 200 to 300 yards. So I had one day on that late doe season. I had the does come out as usual, but about 15 minutes before sunset, so well before last light, I could not see those reticle marks in that scope clear enough to take a chance at about a 250 yard shot. So I called Leupold. I ordered a VX Freedom, which is their lowest priced line of the Leupold scopes, because I knew that even their bottom end scope would be much brighter and have a much better reticle than the cheap scope that came with the rifle. Plus, I could get CDS, their custom dial system, which means once I sight this load in and know the trajectory of it, they will laser cut a dial for me that I simply dial in the range. I zero it for 100, and they're going to have at least 150, 250 yard marks, and depending on the cartridge, sometimes they'll even go to a quarter of 100. So 125, 150, like that. dial in that trajectory very precisely. So I got the new scope. It's mounted on the rifle. I'm going to show you how I sight it in. And since this is not exactly a flat shooting round, I'll show you one other little ballistic thing that I've done over the years that has paid off for me in really fine tuning the drops of the loads. They will give you a ballistic coefficient from the manufacturer, whether it's an aftermarket bullet that you reload or if it's factory ammo. But those are kind of approximations I have found. So it's better to determine that ballistic coefficient for your locale, and that really allows you to fine-tune the trajectory. So I'm going to go through this sight-in process today. So the first thing we want to do is remove the bolts from the rifle. And these Savages, this is the only Savage bolt action I've ever owned, so it's a little bit tricky to get their sequence of events. But once you figure it out, you can pull the bolt out very well. With any rifle where you can see down the bore, the best way to proceed in sighting in a scope is to bore sight it first. Now at 100 yards, I have a large silhouette target turned around backwards just for a big open space. I have an aiming dot in the center of it. So what I will do is get behind the rifle and as nearly as possible you find that aiming dot and you put it in the center of your bore. So you've got the action, the bore, and the dot as concentric as possible lined up through there. Now I can look up to my scope and see where it is. The crosshairs are way above that aiming point. So this thing is going to be shooting very low. So I'm going to need to bring this up quite a lot. So keeping the rifle in the bags as concentrically aligned as I can, and it is now. I've got the elevation drawn down to where the dot is. It's also to the left, which means it's going to shoot to the right. So I need to bring it to the left. You need to hold these things as solid as you can. Check on your marking, which direction you need to go. And make some bold moves. Don't try to do this one or two clicks at a time, but you'll be there for a long time. Okay, concentric back in there. I need to go a little bit more to the left and I will be pretty close. Okay, I'm bore sighted. I've replaced the bolt. This should get me in the paper. It's not going to be dead on by any means, but it's going to get you on the paper and not waste a lot of ammo. If you cannot look through a rifle and bore sight it, say a semi-auto or a lever action, then probably you need to start this process at 50 yards. If you're still having problems, maybe start at 25 to get on the paper, close to the bullseye, and then you can work your way back. I normally sight my long-range rifles with the CDS system at 200 yards. I can do it at 100, I just need to know the curve. For an example, my 280 Remington that I'll be taking on a trip to Wyoming with me in case we get a chance at a wolf. My 280 is sighted at 200 yards, but that means it's going to be 1.7 inches high at 100 yards. So I can dial it into the 1.7 high at 100, and I'm on that trajectory curve. This is a 100-yard sight in. Winchester makes a number of loads for this, and they make some full metal jackets, which are quite a bit less expensive than the hunting grade ammo. They're about the same weight as the 150 grain hunting load I'm going to use. So I'm going to throw some of these much less expensive full metal jackets to do my first group. Okay, bore sighted, that's all. Now, in Illinois, of course, they have to do everything stupid. So not only were they about the last to finally approve straight wall rifle cases, they also specified that they could only be fired from a single shot rifle. So you can't have any kind of a repeater. Now they left the language kind of loose, so DNR, the game warden folks, they cut us a little bit of slack. Their definition of a single shot rifle is any rifle of any kind that can only have one round chambered at a time. So in other words, this round is designed to work in an AR-15 platform. If I want to shoot this from an AR-15 to hunt in Illinois, I can't have a magazine in my possession. So if I just single load one round, I don't have a magazine with me, they'll consider that a single shot. I looked online, and for this Savage, in place of the regular magazine, this is just a loading tray. It snaps in place. In fact, it even has they use the same base plate as the Savage magazine. But I can just throw a round in there and it is strictly a single shot, so I meet their criteria. So let's put a group of 3 down there with these, I believe they're 147 grain, 145 grain full metal jackets. That's going to be my first group. It'll get me close enough to start this sighting in process at 100 yards. I about forgot one comfort aspect of shooting from a wooden topped bench rest. That's to put something under your elbow. If you don't have an elbow pad or a good heavy shirt, when you slide back, you'll occasionally find a splinter in that. So I put something on there. I'm also running this over my older chronograph. I'm gonna get a 3-shot or better velocity comparison that I'm gonna use to match with when I go down to 100 yards. So 3-shot group with the 145 full metal jackets. I'll be checking velocity on every shot. That was 23.35 feet per second. I'll do that for a total of 3. Okay, the first 100-yard group. This is with the full metal jacket that I'm just using to get roughly on the paper. I got a total group size here of about 2.5, but those full metals, in my experience, don't always shoot the greatest. This is a fairly accurate rifle. My first round was right there. So if you use the technique of moving your crosshairs over to that hole, you might get pretty close to being zeroed, but not fine enough, in my opinion, for really precision work. And you have to move not an individual shot, unless your rifle absolutely will put them all in one hole. Few will, reliably. You need to move the group center. I determine center by drawing a line. Center of each hole, like that. Then I will take half of this, go halfway on this line to the opposite hole, halfway on this line to that hole, halfway on this line to that hole. So my group center is really there. Now that's not very far away from that first shot, but if it could add up to a lot out at 300, 400, 500 yards or more, or with a round that does not have a really flat trajectory. So here's the group center that I need to move. And it means that I need to come about 3¼ inches left, and about 1 inch up. So I'm going to adjust that scope. 1 inch up, 3¼ inches to the left. And what we're going to learn when we do that is not all scopes have perfect adjustments. This is a 1/4 minute of angle adjustment, so it should, at 100 yards, move it roughly 1/4 inch for each click. So if I'm going to do that, I need 4 clicks up, 13 clicks left. Chances are it won't go there exactly. This is the bottom end scope that Leupold makes. Their stuff is good, but I don't expect it to be as accurate in the adjustments as a VH6 or something like that that has, you know, a $2,000–3,000 scope. So we're going to go 13 left, we're going to go 4 clicks up. Okay, my adjustments: 4 clicks up, 13 clicks to the left. Now, I'm going to switch to my hunting load with the 150 grain deer season load from Winchester. The first set of chronograph data I got on the full metal jackets is just for curiosity's sake. What I really want to know is the 150 deer season load. Now, since I'm changing loads, the corrections I dialed in were for the full metal jackets. That should put them right where I want them. We're going to see some little variation here, but it's going to get us pretty close with these deer season loads. First velocity, 2249. Okay, second group. I've changed ammunition. I made these corrections to the full metal jacket, which should have put it pretty much group center there. But at the same time, I changed ammunition. No sense wasting. This is the 150 deer season load that I'm going to hunt with. Group size here, and I'll tell you, I'm not as steady today as I have been other days. It's just over 1.5 inches. I'm going to do my group center again. Halfway on these lines to the crossing. The group center's about there. Changing loads with those corrections, I think that's pretty good. We're less than 1 inch away with changing loads. So I'd say the adjustments on that scope are pretty much dead on, which is what we want from a CDS, from a dialable elevation knob. We want that kind of accuracy. All right, we are about 3/4 of an inch or 3 clicks right. And about 3 clicks, it's about 3 clicks high. So 3 clicks down. I don't need this big thing now. I'm going to be putting that group pretty much on that dot. So I'm going to shift over to another target that I created a number of years ago when I was doing sniper training. And I have found that you can get your best groups often with a square kind of target. This is one I drew up on Corel Draw, printed some out. Now I just run them on a copy machine. This is a 1/2 inch grid, so I know where I can make 1/2 minute of angle adjustments, including in the center here. 1 inch sides, 2 inches in the middle. 4 inch overall box. That'll work for most rifles out to a couple hundred yards. With that crosshair in there, you're going to see if you're level. As long as this is pretty level, you're going to quarter that, and I find that you can get some of your best accuracy doing that kind of target. So we're going to set some up, but before I do, I'm going to set up to do fine ballistic calculations. And to do that, I'm moving my chronograph to the 100-yard line. It'll take me just a minute to get this set up on the target, but now when I fire a group on that target, I'm going to be getting the 100-yard velocity as well as muzzle velocity that I got 100 yards back. I can compare those and see how Winchester's ballistic coefficient truly measures out. There, now the bullets will go in between the chronographs under the sky screens and give me readings when I impact that 100-yard target. Okay, I need 3 clicks of adjustment down, 3 clicks of adjustment to the right. This will be going through the chronograph make sure I'm lined up. Adjustments have been made. 3 clicks right, 3 clicks down. Should put my group center about where I want it at 100 yards. I have the chronograph set up so the bullet will pass over the chronograph just before it impacts the target. That'll give me the 100-yard velocity that I can compare with the muzzle velocity and determine the ballistic coefficient. Hopefully the last 3 will shoot. Okay, you can see I got a chronograph reading here. I'm not going to hold this and bore you in front of the camera, but I'll get the 3-shot average, extreme spread, and all those kind of details so that I can calculate the ballistic coefficient. Okay, 3-shot group. A little tough to measure group center because of the way they're lined out. So really group center is probably going to be about that hole, which means I need another 1/2 to 3/4 inches right. Elevation is maybe 1 click up. I'm going to make those corrections on the rifle. I'm going to leave it. Deer season is a good several months away. Won't use that rifle for anything else. I will come back and make a fine adjustment on that at shooting temperatures. It's about 80 degrees today. It's getting warm. I'm tired enough that my eyes are not focusing real great. So I'm gonna make those adjustments. 3/4 right and 1/4 up. Then I'll leave it alone until I get into the 35 to 40 degree temperature range, and I'll final calculate everything then. But I believe I have enough with all the meteorological information I have at 80 degrees. I can determine ballistic coefficient and see if Winchester's number is close enough for Leupold to cut that custom dial. And we'll do this when we get it home. Okay, there are a couple of different ways to calculate ballistic coefficient when you have the velocity of your round at 2 different distances. There are some old formulas you can use from Hatcher's notebook, things like that. It requires a little bit of math. It's easier, in my experience, to just use a good ballistic software package and kind of fiddle with ballistic coefficients until you get the numbers to match up. I like JBM Ballistics. It's an online source. It has everything from simple trajectory calculation to some complicated things you can do. It's free, and it's always up to date, and in my experience, very accurate. You got to set some parameters. It has a library of bullets you can use. It does not normally include factory loaded ammunition, so you're going to need to enter your data manually. Winchester quotes a ballistic coefficient for that 150 deer season load in the 350 Legend. Ballistic coefficient is 0.225. That's a G1 or G7 models are the 2 most commonly used for rifle type bullets. So 0.225 according to Winchester, that's on the 150 grain deer season bullet. Diameter is 0.357. My muzzle velocity was 2245 feet per second. That's about 5 feet to the center of the chronograph from the muzzle of the rifle. So I'm telling it that the distance to the chronograph is 5 feet. It's going to up that number slightly to give a true muzzle velocity, and that's all built into the software package. When you use these, you need to set your sight height, which is for most scoped rifles is about 1.5. For AR-15s or M16s, the sight height is generally about 2.5. That changes the way it calculates things, so you need to be pretty accurate on that. You're going to set the distance, the readout of what you want. I've put this to read out a maximum of 400 yards in 25 round increments. I am zeroed at 100 yards. You can change that to whatever you're going to do. My atmospherics today were a temperature of 80 degrees, 36% humidity, 30.13 inches of mercury for pressure, and I'm at an altitude of 650 feet. So you plug those things in, you tell it to calculate. So it's going to give me a remaining velocity for a number of different distances based on that Winchester ballistic coefficient of 0.225. So it says that under these kind of conditions, my remaining velocity at 100 yards should be 1,915 feet per second. But what I actually measured today on the range was 1958. So that's about 43 feet per second faster remaining velocity than what it should have had according to Winchester's ballistic coefficient. So this is performing better. In my experience, a lot of ballistic coefficients are kind of optimistic. The reality when you check them is they're not quite as flat shooting as the manufacturer says. This one appears to be doing better. So the easiest way to get, I need this number here, this 1915, I need it to read about 1958. And I can do that by changing the ballistic coefficient. I'll save a lot of time. I tried about 4 or 5 different numbers as I worked my way up to it. I ended up at 2.60, or 0.260, excuse me. So that's a better ballistic coefficient than what Winchester quotes. We'll go down here, the atmospherics are the same, 80 degrees, 36%, 30.13 inches of mercury. We hit calculate again, and now our 100 yard remaining velocity is 1957.8, or in other words 1958 feet per second, which is exactly what my average velocity was today on the range. That means this ballistic coefficient is performing at 0.260 rather than 225. It's going to shoot flatter, not a lot flatter, but enough to make a difference. Now the fly in this ointment, it is based on 80% or 80 degree temperature and these other atmospherics. That's going to change when it comes time for hunting season. I'm probably going to be looking at more like 40 degrees temperature, probably more humid, so I'm going to bump that up to 65%. I'll leave pressure the way it is. Let's calculate this again now. The cooler temperatures, the powder generally is less efficient. There are modern powders now that are temperature insensitive. They vary very little from high to low temperatures. That's not used in a lot of factory ammunition. Some companies do use it. So the cooler temperature, the denser air, means it's going to slow down more in hunting season. It's going to be, instead of 1958, it's going to be about 1940. 18 feet per second is not that much difference. It makes a very little difference out at 200 or 300 yards. But when you're shooting long range, 600-700 yards, as some people are wont to do on Western big game these days, that stuff adds up quite a bit. But what I have now is the information I need to send to Leupold for them to cut the CDS, the custom dial system knob for that 350 Legend rifle. And that means that at hunting distances here, say a maximum range of 300 yards, I think you're running out of poop. You're down to 1,400 feet per second roughly. Energy, which I think has almost nothing to do with killing power, is down to 661. That round is out of steam. That bullet's slowing down too much. So it may be a 250 yard cartridge. Perfect hit on a doe whitetail deer. I'll try 250 to 300 and see if the bullet performance gives what we need. But I don't want to wound an animal. I want a humane kill as much as I can. So I will send Leupold the information. They know very well that Winchester quotes a 0.225, but I'll tell them my chronograph gives me a ballistic coefficient of 0.260 at 80 degrees, and let them do all their magic math and predict what that will be when they cut it down for 40 degrees for hunting season. I have a couple of other rifles that use the CDS dials, both a 280 Remington and 338 Win Mag, and they are so accurate at long range based on Leupold's ballistic calculations that they're spooky. This thing is 95% accurate plus even out at long distances. So you get to where if you have an accurate rifle and you can get solid enough to get a good trigger break and a clean aim, you can kill game farther than you probably should be shooting with this system. So I can now send that information out to Leupold, and they will cut a dial for that rifle, and come hunting season, I will verify at the colder temperatures that I have exactly the zero I need at 100 yards. I should never have to touch that rifle again. It's a synthetic stock that's not going to move. I'm going to use the same load unless for some reason I get lousy performance, and from what I've gathered from other people using that load, it's a really good whitetail bullet. So that should get us where we need. That's the kind of precision sighting and the precision ballistic coefficient calculation that can really put you on the money for these kind of rifles. I want to start this segment by saying I'm not being paid by Leupold to do this. This is not an ad for their equipment. There are other brands out there that have very similar systems. Leupold has always offered discounts to gun writers and hunting guides. I wrote for the police magazines for a number of years. I got writer discount. That's why I could afford to buy the good Leupold stuff. I've used Burris. I've used a number of other American-made rifle scopes over the years. I think Leupold is as good as it can get, and the discount is handy. This particular scope is a VH6 HD, and this is how the custom dial system will be made for you when you send them the data. This is for a 280 Remington. It's using a 160 grain Nosler AccuBond bullet at 28-25 feet per second. I have hand loaded that bullet to substantially higher velocities. I have a long throated custom chamber that lets me up that velocity. But what I did when I changed over to temperature stabilized powders was, since the ballistic coefficients of the two bullets are very similar, I have trajectory matched my 280 with my 338 Win Mag. I can interchange these dials on either rifle, and they both have the VH6 scopes. This is a 3-18. I have a 2-12 on the 338 Win Mag. But what I found was, if I loaded this down from the maximum I've actually had it to, it will match the trajectory of the 338 out to about 650 or 700 yards. So I only have to learn one curve. This dial is cut for 5,500 feet of elevation. That's an area that I normally hunt in Wyoming. And you got 1,000 to 1,500 feet of fudge factor up and down with these before they start to make a major difference. I had it matched for 40 degrees Fahrenheit. It's set for yards, not meters, and they're telling you that the adjustments on this particular scope are quarter MOA. And they will cut that specific information and match your trajectory curve. Each of these comes with one free dial. You can buy extra dials if you want one. Perhaps, my home area is 650 feet elevation. If I'm sheep hunting, I may be up to 8 or 9, so I might need to get another dial made for that higher elevation. The higher you go in elevation, the flatter your trajectory will be, simply because the air is thinner. It doesn't slow the bullet down as much. Okay, this is the business end of these custom dials, and as I say, Leupold is not the only one that makes them. So you can get this system on other scopes as well, custom dialed into what you need. You can see that's set at 2 now. That means this rifle is zeroed at 200 yards. Now, not all Leupold CDSs are the same. The one that I'm putting together for the 350 Legend, it does not have zero lock. What zero lock means, once this thing goes down to your bottom setting of 200, it locks in place. You can't go below that. So if it's dark, you can just dial down to where it stops, and that will be your zero. But if I'm going to take a shot at something further away, the longest shot I've ever taken on game was 467 yards, measured by laser, on a Shiras moose that you've probably seen hanging on the wall behind some of my videos. 467 yards, there's 450. You can see the 500 on the dial, so that's about 467 yards. I have no holdover needs whatsoever. The crosshairs will match the point of impact. I'm still going to need to worry about windage. You can calculate your windage. You can estimate it by turning this dial if you want to. It also has a zero lock. But the reticle in this scope has hash marks every minute of angle, left, right, up, and down. And it's also illuminated. By hitting the illumination button here, you can turn it on. It will glow red. You can adjust the brightness for what you need for that particular circumstance. So wind holdover, I'm probably going to hold minutes of angle left or right using the hash marks on the reticle. One other neat feature of the VX6 series, HD series, I'm not sure about the 5s or other Leupolds, but this has a built-in level that you can turn on. You have to have the reticle illumination turned on, but when you do, if you are more than 1 degree of cant to the left or right, the red part of the reticle will flash, telling you that you're not level. You simply adjust it back to level. When the flashing stops, you are exactly leveled. So you don't need to mount a spirit level on one of your rings or something like that. So this is some pretty high-tech stuff. It's costly stuff, but if you really want to be good at long range, this is the kind of stuff you're going to need. Hope this has been useful to you. Stay safe out there. I'd like to take a little time to do a little business. First of all, shameless plug for my book, my second book, Building a Better Gunfighter. I have a number of these in paper copy. They are still available on either eBay or on my website at dickfairburn.com. The first book, Police Rifles, is no longer in print, but both of these will soon be out in an ebook format, so you can pick them up that way. I would also like to ask you to please subscribe, ring the little notification bell, and if you like what I'm doing here, give me a thumbs up. That's what helps grow this channel. That's what helps develop more content for you that are interested in what I want to do. So I appreciate it if you could buy the book, if you can subscribe, ring the bell, and give me a thumbs up. Thank you very much.
Okay, we got them both here now. You ready? Bud got one. Ginger got one. Oh, she missed it. She usually gets them, doesn't she, Bud? Okay, girl, last one. You ready? You ready? Yeah! That's all there is till next time.